If this is the first time you use R or RStudio, welcome to RStudio. We are going to give the first steps using the console, the R console, and we're going to carry out some interactive calculations. To be familiar with the display of RStudio, I'd also like to know that if you are, depending on what operating system you're running, if you're running Windows or Linux or Mac OS 10, the display may look a little different than what you're seeing here in this capsule. I'm running RStudio on a MacBook Pro, but the commands are going to be the same. So this on the left hand side, this is basically splitted here into two sections. On the left hand side, we have the so-called console. You will notice on the top that it states what version of R this is running, and typically along with a number, in this case is 3.2, version 3.2, which was released on 2014, October 31st of 2014. Typically with that number you will find a funny name or a funny message. In this case is pumpkin helmet. So according to when you install R and what version you have, you will see a specific number and a different message there. But in the console, we can type commands, and but let's start by typing something. Let's say we type 3 plus 4, okay? And then we hit enter. So you notice that once we hit enter, the answer is printed, and there is a labeling there for the answer in between square brackets. In this case, that label is the sum of 3 plus 4. We can type numbers directly, or we can make use of variables. For example, I could store 3 plus 4 into a variable and say a equals 3 plus 4. And if I type, well, let me just type this and hit enter, then there is no output, right? So if I type, the other thing that I like to point to your attention is a very convenient command with the arrow key. If I use the upward arrow, I will be able to bring back some of the commands I had previously typed. Okay, I could retype that, or use the on the keyboard, I look for the arrow key pointing upward, and I bring the command I had previously typed, 3 plus 4. If I use the semicolon and now type A and hit enter, then I will get a display of the value stored in that variable A that we're calling A. So we can also make use of standard operators for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. So let's use some variables, say x. We're going to store the value of 5 in x, and we're going to store the value of 2, y equals 2. That'll be stored in the variable y. And now with those values, I can define other variables that take into account operations between x and y. For example, I'm going to say z1 is the multiplication x, and here we use the asterisk x times y. And if I want to see what is the output of z1, I can type z1 and hit enter, or using the upward arrow key, I can type z1 equals x times y, semicolon, and then z1. And that will display the value that's stored in that variable z1. And now let's create some space by hitting enter. I'm going to define z2 as x divided by y. If I want to see what is z2, then x divided by y would be 2.5. z3 equals x raised to the y. So I'm using here the power of raising to a power, and let me use the semicolon here and display this quantity. Okay, so we can define variables making use of some built-in functions, and you have to keep in mind that R basically is going to preserve the standard order of operations. For example, I can define A equals 3 and C being A plus 2 times square root of A divided by A plus 5 times the square root of A. So I define the variables C involving multiplication, square root, addition, division, and so on. Then I type a semicolon and retype the name of that variable, and this will print out on the screen the value that's stored on that new variable C. Okay, this concludes a brief introduction into interactive calculations using the R console.